Well, welcome everybody to what we call a biomechanical lecture, maybe. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to be invited to do this lecture, especially because I have experienced a lot of problems working on the biomechanics in the last 25 years. What I noticed is that teaching the biomechanics, I encountered a lot of misunderstandings about the biomechanics. The problem is, of course, due to what history has told us about biomechanics. We are facing something which has been developed more than about 100, well, you can say a bit more than 100 years ago. And I want to avoid, as much as I can, I want to avoid the historical context biomechanics has been developed. Let's say that Meyerhold was one of these very interesting artists of the avant-garde of Russia in the 1920s and a bit earlier, actually. The biomechanics has been developed as a kind of a reaction, you could say, to what his teacher, which was Stanislavski, with whom he has been playing together on stage. In one of the examples that is quite interesting is that they have been playing together the Seagull, in which Meyerhold was playing the young artist and Stanislavski was playing the older artist. Now, one sentence that struck me about that play was that at a certain point he says to, well, not to Stanislavski, but to the character, he says, what we need are new forms. Well, if you look at the history that how these two people have been working and developing how theater had to be played at that time, how theater had to be developed at that time, it is interesting to see that their kind of biography represent this one sentence. Meyerhold indeed has been looking for new forms. And Stanislavski was, of course, his teacher, and he never denied that he was actually a student from Stanislavski. But as I said, I don't want to talk about this historical context. There's a lot to read about that. There's a lot of interesting books about that. And I think you can research that. It's quite easy to find that. There are very interesting books. One of them is written by Alma Lowe and Mel Gordon. And these you can easily find and read about. What you might not really find is a lot of information about the biomechanics itself. What I would like to do today is to introduce you what I would call the 7 main principles of the biomechanics. And to start with, we have to look at what I would call one of the most interesting principles, which he calls отказ. Отказ is a Russian word. It means refusal. So refusal. So I would like, before I start talking about отказ, I would like to do a little experiment with you. Now, what I would like you to do is the following thing. I would like you, as you are probably all sitting on a chair, I would like you to just take a bit distance of your table and sit down on your chair. And what we are going to do, you're going to try to sit upwards and have contact with the back of the seat. Your feet should be on the floor. And if the chair is not too high, I don't know. And what we're going to do, we're going to analyze, so to say, a very daily movement, what we do actually every day, standing up, sitting down from a chair, right? So I would like you, for yourself, just as a little experiment, to question yourself, how do I do that? Which means as soon as you leave the back of the chair, the movement has started. Do not rush. Just try to find for yourself, what kind of movement principles do I use to get up from the chair? So you can do this a few times and try for yourself to find out what really happens there. There's a lot happening in this very simple daily movement. Okay. Thank you. Now I will try to explain why we just did that. So if I want to stand up from a chair, there are 2 things happening. One thing is that I have to shift my way from the chair, where I have given all my way, and I have to shift that way between my legs so I can actually stand up, right? So to stand up, you have to make a shift of the way. That's one thing. But there's another thing which is really interesting. for us, especially if we have a look at the biomechanics, is that actually standing up from the chair, I will make a preparation which is actually going in the opposite direction. Now, this is, of course, very different from one person to another person, but we kind of all will use that principle of making an opposite movement, which means I will go a bit down before I actually go up, right? Can you kind of, maybe you can do this one more time and focus on this little moment that you make a refusal. So you kind of refuse what you want to do. You want to stand up from the chair, but what you do is you refuse in the very first moment that upwards movement, right? This is a very subtle movement. We are not very conscious about this movement because this is something we actually do every day, right? Thank you. Now, this moment where you actually engage the movement and you make this refusal is actually what your intention is. As soon as somebody is in the room and he starts or she starts making this preparation, we can all read the intention. It's just like somebody holding a stick or a stone, whatever, in the hand, and bringing the hand or the arm back before the throwing. As if I would make a snapshot of that moment, I would know what the intention of the person is, right? So basically what happens is that before you actually can execute an intention, you have to make a preparation movement. Now, this sounds quite simple, which it is in some way. What we see here is that to stand up from a chair, I need to engage the whole body. If I would just go to, let's say, if I want to say, okay, I'm going to get up from the chair, I'm going to go straight up. This will not be possible. It is not possible. So I need the preparation. Now, if we look at it a bit larger than this one, and we say, okay, when you throw a stick, okay, that's evident. Okay, I can follow that. I have to make a preparation to throw as far as I can. That's fine. Now, there are so many moments in daily life that we are actually using this preparation movement. We don't have a consciousness about that because it's so logical. Now, if you open the door, for instance, you want to press down the how you call it, the clinch. So you will probably lift up the hand a bit more before you actually go down to open that door. There are 1,000 examples that you can find of this preparation movement into your daily life. And if I would go even further, I could say, before I speak, I have to breathe in. Now, the breathing in is the opposition of the talking, right? So it is actually this principle of atkas is something which is happening all the time in our daily life. Now, a fundamental rule of the biomechanic is that when you make a movement, you will always involve the whole body. Meyerhold said in his own words, he said, when the tip of the nose works, the whole body is actually working, right? This is, I would call, the first principle. Now, to help you, I'm going to try to do my best because I'm really not good with technology. So I'm going to try to show you this path, where you can see the definition of the first one. So we are talking actually about atkas, literally refusal. Atkas is a preparation movement preceding the actual intended movement. It's like reaching back or taking a swing before the throw. And this is where the idea is born, or the intention is born. Now that would be the, let's say, the first principle. Don't put too much attention on the being the first, second, the third, the fourth. It's just like we're trying to go from one to another. And as soon as you have made the preparation movement, of course, the intention has to be exercised. Now, the movement has to be sent. Now, the sending of the movement we will call posil. I will not spend too much time on that because that's a logical consequence of the preparation movement that you make. When the movement comes to an end, you will have a fixation, which we call adkas. I will show you one more time. Adkas. So the pursuit literally descending. So the pursuit is the realization of the intended movement, what we just talked about. And then we have Stoica, which again is a Russian word, which really literally means stance. It is a dynamic fixation at the end of a movement phrase with the perspective of a new adkas. So basically, as an actor, you will always, when you make a Stoica, when you make a fixation, you will include the idea that you will be making a new adkas. So you will make a new preparation so that you can continue the whole sequence of movements that you have to execute. Okay, now, of course, you cannot just go 1, 2, 3. You will have to control these movements. Now, the controlling of that movement, you will have to slow down to be precise in your fixation. Now, the fixation as we call the Stoica, will be normally, most of the time, preceded by what we call tormos. Tormos, as you can see here, literally means the break. So tormos enhances the precision and the musicality of a movement, and it is often used at the end of a movement sequence. The tormos is something which will give the actor the possibility, as you can read here, to make a movement become musical. And I choose not to say rhythmical, which indeed it is, because to me, when I talk about rhythmic, I'm afraid it might become like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you talk about music, music is connected to a melody. So it means it has much more amplitude, it has much more quality, and it gives another impression from the outside of how the movement is constructed. Now, I will continue just going through all these principles, and then I will try to give a bit more information about the whole idea of the biomechanics. The next thing we see on this is Groupirovka. Now, the Groupirovka literally is the meaning of the grouping. So, which means that you are like if you want to make a jump, you will indeed make a preparation, probably downwards, but the whole body will kind of group, will come together. It is a physical concentration around often what we call the point of command. I will explain that a bit later. And in connection with adkas, with this literally refusal idea. It creates a dramatic tension in the body and in space. And the last point, and I will not put too much emphasis on that because this is kind of a logical thing that follows out of what we have been discussing so far, is that the counterpoint is something you will use while making a scenic movement. So the actor includes a counter movement to generate a bigger impact of his initial movement and form. So these are, let's say, the 7 principles that we are using when we talk about biomechanics. A lot of time when I work with actors or I talk about biomechanics with people, they always, because it's not very well known, people will ask me, what is biomechanics? And generally I always answer in the beginning what it is not before saying what it really is. So, and here we go to the misunderstanding. It is not a technique. It is not a technique. This is important because a lot of people say, oh yeah, biomechanics, I know it's a technique, da, 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 da. Well, you can definitely say to the people, if you talk about biomechanics, you can say, well, listen, I'm quite sure this is not a technique. That's one thing. The second thing, which is probably even worse, I would say, is the understanding of the biomechanics as an acting style. And this is, of course, connected to the historics of the biomechanics. The biomechanics has been developed in the 20s, and it was very much influenced by the style of, let's say, what the arts were about in that time. So we're talking about constructivism, we're talking about avant-garde, and Meyerhold was indeed looking for new forms. So what he did was very expressive, was very grotesque as a form. And we all know, I hope you all kind of all seen maybe these famous pictures which you might know from Nikolai Kustov. Nikolai Kustov was instructor at Meyerhold Theatre in the 30s, kind of late 30s. Meyerhold was taken into prison in 1939, and then he was sent to jail, and he was sentenced to death and killed on 2nd of February 1940. From that moment on, biomechanics, Meyerhold is persona non grata. It is not allowed. They don't want anybody to talk about Meyerhold and his heritage. So what Stalin has tried is to really completely eradicate everything which was connected to Meyerhold and the biomechanics. So everybody was kind of afraid to work on biomechanics and use the word biomechanics or use the word Meyerhold, as it was dangerous. So we have a problem that all of a sudden you have a big stop in the development of the biomechanics. So we have like about 4 decades where nothing happens about biomechanics anymore, even though Meyerhold was rehabilitated in 1953, even though nobody kind of picked it up again. So we have this instructor who became much older, and it was late 60s, when in the late 70s he kind of showed up again working for on a play at Theatre de Satire, as it was called, in Moscow. And he started working with a few actors where he kind of started using the biomechanics and the whole principles and working on etudes. Now, these pictures that you see here, they are photos from one of those etudes. I don't spend that much time on talking about the etudes, as I want to focus much more on the biomechanics itself and how to see it in a contemporary context. This is Nikolai Kustov, and as I said, thanks to him, I can talk about biomechanics today. 2 of his students, Gennady Bogdanov and Alexei Levinsky, were 2 of his students who kind of continued the teaching of the biomechanics after that. They traveled around the world and have been teaching this all over the world. And I am one of these students. We have had a look at the whole principles of the biomechanics. We know that we are thankful to Nikolai Kustov to be able to talk about biomechanics, to continue that. But the picture you just saw, you can see the amazing expressive forms that the body is using. Now, the misunderstanding is that people started believing that this is the way you have to use the body on the stage. Of course, this is not true. We know that in America, Lee Strasberg, Alia Kazan, they took the pictures of Nikolai Kustov back to America after seeing productions. I think it was in Germany, in Berlin. They took this back home and they tried to reconstruct the biomechanics, but they were not able to do so. Indeed, you can reproduce that form, but what will you do with the form if you don't know the content? So the content is exactly that we have been talking about. It is about these principles. It is not about the form. It is about the content of the movement. It is about the principles. So I am very irritated when people think that the biomechanics is connected to an acting style. Because if I know the principles which we have been talking about, the way you're going to use this is up to the form and up to the play you want to play. It's up to the language of the director. It's up to the text you want to play. It's up to how you want to interpret a certain play. And it is not in this form that we have just seen. Not at all. I just want to tell you a small anecdote, because when I was still living in Belgium, I got an invitation from a very big theater in Belgium, in Brussels, and they wanted to do a play from Peter Handke. The time we didn't know it's some, I don't know how you say in English, but die Zeit, dass wir nicht voneinander wussten, die Stunde, dass wir nicht voneinander wussten, which means the time that we didn't know about each other, which is a play with about, I think, 170 characters or something, and they're all coming together on a marketplace, and there is no word speaking. So I thought, yeah, well, that's That's perfect because it's body language. Indeed, that's interesting. So I was waiting for them to send me the contract, but I never got a contract. So I called them back and asked this woman, she was the eminence grise of the dramaturge in Belgium. And I called her and I said, well, I didn't hear from you anymore, so what's going on? And she said, oh yeah, well, we have been thinking about it. It's not really it's not really the style we are looking for. And from that moment on, I realized it's going to be really difficult to bring the biomechanics to people because there is a lot of misunderstanding there. If these people have such an important function, have the wrong idea about the biomechanics, how are we going to solve this? It's almost impossible, right? So I started teaching the biomechanics because I was very convinced about it when I started as an actor to use this. I noticed how much it gave me as an actor, how much expression, how much freedom I got all of a sudden as a performer. Now to transmit this to other people, I had to find for myself a way to teach that. And of course, I was taught by this Russian schooling, which is quite tough. And there are some Russians here with us, so you probably know that what I mean. The Russian school is a tough one. And I tried, like copying almost my teacher, because I thought, well, that's the only way I know it, so I'm going to give it the way he does. And I realized most of the actors, they just did not want to do that. They were absolutely refusing that because for them it made no sense. So I had to adapt this biomechanics to what do actors need nowadays. This was the little anecdote and little how to say, I try to make it clear for you all what the problems are that you are facing when you talk about biomechanics. So for me, the biomechanics is indeed a very contemporary approach of physical acting. But I don't like the word physical theater, and that's a very personal thing. I don't want to offend anybody with that. But at what point does physical theater start? At what point does physical theater stop? So I started thinking, and I was like, okay, but hang on. As soon as I get on the stage, I am physical, right? So problem. For me, it was a problem. I thought it has to be more than just a tool for physical theater. It is much deeper than that. When I look at the principles, as I told you, with the chaos, the preparation movement is not something which is only connected to the physical theater. It's something which is actually there in my daily life. So the bigger I started making these movements, these preparation movements, the more I was using my whole body. My whole body, as Meyerhold said, when the tip of the nose is working, the whole body is working. Now, we know that sometimes, especially when we are working with texts, and I'm talking about actors in general, and of course there's a lot of differentiation to make there. We talk about the text, and of course we go into the thinking, and that's right, we need to do that. But if we go the Stanislavski way, you have, as Stanislavski said it, you have the text, you have the emotion to the text, and the movement will logically be the right one. Now, Meyerhold said, I don't agree with that. Indeed, we have the text, indeed. But then we are going to look for the physical movement. And by doing this physical movement, we will try to find, or we will most probably find the emotion to that movement. Now, this is, of course, like turning up the pyramid upside down, which I think is very interesting. Why is it interesting? Because I think if I would be working like making a biography of my character, and I think, well, I can imagine about the childhood and about the psychology of my character and say, yeah, when I was 17, I got, or when I was whatever. And you can start about all the problems you have to build and construct this whole psychology, which will help you to create a character. And I think that's fine. But at a certain point, I might come to a point where I will say, hang on, no. My character would never do that. And I can tell you why. And then I take my little notes and I say, look here, because of this, because of that, it is not possible. This person would never do that. Now, if I look at this construction of Meyerhold saying you have the text and you have the movement, I have much more freedom. Why would a character not be doing this? Why? Out of psychological reflection. Why would it be that? That's a problem. You create a problem for yourself as an actor. You kind of restrict your range of possibilities, right? So when I talk about freedom, that's what I call. I try to teach the people, when I work with them, when I work with actors, I try to tell them, you have to send the body forward. Send the body forward. Rely on your material. You will find that freedom. But not just the movement for the movement, because the movement that you make has to become a thought. And of course, you have indeed been preparing your character. You're not just blanco on the stage. You know exactly what the text is about, what the scene is about, what the character is actually wanting from the other character, whatever. You know the emotional context, so you know a lot. So when you send the body forward, all this information will be immediately at your disposal. The only thing is that you'll find another form to transmit that, rather than, let's say, the psychological approach to build up the character. Now, I just mentioned the words material. Meyerhold said, every art is organization of material. The first time I read that, I was thinking, wow, is that true? Is that really true? So I started like looking at all art forms. Okay, when I look at painting, right, okay, yeah, indeed, it's right. You have indeed the canvas, you have the brush, you have the painting. You are indeed organizing that material to create your painting. That's right. Okay, when I look at sculpture, yeah, you have a piece of stone, whatever. I start making something out of that. Indeed, I am organizing that material. So I kept on going in all. When I look at music, yeah, indeed, you have the notes. You have to organize, or when you compose the music, you have to organize the notes. Indeed, it's always a kind of organization of material. You cannot avoid that. Now, careful, very careful. Some people hear, when I say that, some people hear that it is that organization of material is art. No, of course, we know this is not true. It's not that. It is art is organizational material, but not every organizational material will be art. So when we look at the actor, we have a very interesting dilemma here, because the actor can never take distance to his material. He is the material. So he cannot take a distance to what his, like the other artist can do. He cannot go like the painter at 10 o'clock at night, say, inspiration is gone, I'm going to close my atelier, I'm going to go home, and I leave the material and I go in the pub and drink a whiskey. Or a tea, if you want. So the actor actually has the advantage in this dilemma that he's actually always traveling around with his material. So if we look at this and say that every art is organization of material, and we look at the actor, we can say, okay, that's interesting, because the actor is the creator at the same time as the creation. Or if in other words, he is the artist who is actually the artwork. Yeah, and I don't want to put too much emphasis on the artwork, but it's just about being unable to take a distance to your material. When I look at dancers who are actually facing with the same problem or the same dilemma, it's not a problem, but it's a dilemma. It's an interesting dilemma. I notice, because I work sometimes with dancers as well, I notice they are actually always working on their material. They never give up. They are always, every day, they will be working on, they will be making exercises, they will start studying, they will study moves, they will really research their material just like every other artist will do. Now, the actor is somebody who kind of is rather lazier, I would say. I have to be very careful. I don't want to offend anybody, because this will not apply to every actor, of course. But of course, I have been working with a lot of actors, and I can say this happens again and again and again and again and again. The actors are very easily happy with what they have been doing, and they will just, well, they will not feel the need to work on the body. What they will do, they will definitely try to find the emotional substances of the character. This they will continue, but this is not material. This is not concrete. When we talk about energy, we talk about emotion. I'm not saying this is not there. This is a very important thing for the actor, but it's not the only thing for the actor. But when I talk with actors, they will not talk about their material and how to put it into form, into the creation, but they will always talk about emotion. Now, the problem with emotion is that emotions are very subjective. If I say I feel, nobody will say, no, Tony, you're lying. Nobody can do that. So my emotions are like, you know, if I say I feel, already you have to shut up, so to say, because you can never come into my system and say you're lying or you're pretending or whatever. It's impossible. So that's dangerous stuff. Now, if you work with the body, it's very concrete. It is there. You can work on the body, and you can prepare the body to create the character. Now, when we say creating the character, or creating the character, and you think about biomechanics, the question might be, okay, how do you do that? When I work with actors, the first thing I will ask them is to leave the axis. I will ask them to go out of their axis, because as soon as you're in your very comfortable zone, like being in the axis, you will always carry that very personal tension, which is yours. As soon as you start moving out of the axis, you create already a new tension in the body. Now, this can be grotesque, but this can be very, very subtle as well. When we train the biomechanics, we will always look for the maximum amplitude of a movement, just as a training to get familiar with the possibilities the body is offering you. By looking for this new access, I will use the point of command. Now, the point of command is another, it's not I will not call it a principle, but it's a point in the body which is connected. So you could call it, we have to be careful because it's not very precise to say that way, but you could say it is the plexus, solar plexus. So this is this point in the middle of the chest. Now, as soon as, if I sit in front of you and I just move this inside, and I don't have to change anything, you know, and I talk to you like that, the impression you get from how I talk, I didn't change anything in my feelings, in my thoughts. I didn't change anything. I just changed the posture by going out of the axis. And if I talk like this to you, you have a different person in front of you. So it is kind of that simple, you could say. So I work a lot on this because Meyerhold said, and I think this is really interesting, he said, well, I'm trying to say it the way he said it, because I always say it in my words. Hang on, I wrote it somewhere down. The question is where? Oh, here. He said, every physical change changes the psyche. I put it in my own words, and I like to say, well, every physical change will change the way you think. And I think that's, for me, this has been a very important point. Why? Because when I think about emotions, we talk a lot about emotions, but nobody ever told me what is emotion. Of course, you have the word, and I don't want to make this play of words saying motion, which is movement. I'm not doing that. But if I say emotion, I have to think about, what do I need to have an emotion? What do a person need to have emotions? Young actors especially don't question that. They think that emotion is something given by God. And might be that it's right. but it's very hard to use that on the stage because it's not concrete. I like to work with concrete things, something they can reproduce, they can take back home, they can practice, and they can keep for them in their backpack for the rest of their life, for the rest of their career. So when I look at the word, the idea of emotion, I think, what do I need to get an emotion? Well, what I need is definitely an input from outside. If somebody tells me a nice thing, or if let's say, this is something I do with the actors when I work with them, and I said something really bad to them, I say, you're an asshole, do you know? And then you see the change in the because the information, you see the change you see the emotion in their face. And that's to the same person I would say, you have beautiful eyes. And then all of a sudden there's a smile on that face. And it's just because you have an input from the outside. Now, it's the same with the touch of the skin. It's the same with what I see. If I see something really beautiful, I might be touched. If I say something horrible, I might be frightened. There's something happening into my emotions. Now, just as hypothetically, because it's not possible, if we would say we don't have any sins. No, hang on, not the word sins, I'm confused now. No senses. So we don't have the touching, the hearing, the smelling, the tasting, the seeing, all these senses. If I would be capable of taking them out, it's not possible, I know. Does that mean I would have no more emotions? I thought, no, it's not possible. So what I said before is not right, unless I have my thoughts. And of course, a thought is also an input. It's something that's coming out of a memory, out of just the brain's working, thinking about something that gives me an input again. So what I need to get emotion is input. I need some kind of an input. Now, we were talking about thinking, and I go back to what he said, Meyerhold. Every physical change will change your thinking. And this is something I have really been practicing with young actors when I send them out on the streets and I ask them to work on this point of command and to put it somewhere. Is it out? Is it into the side? Whatever it is, however grotesque it is. And then I send them out on the streets and they have to behave like real humans. And when they come back into the room, they tell me the most amazing experiences they have made, because all of a sudden they start doing things that they would never do themselves. And it's not constructed out of a psychology, it's purely based on the physical change, right? So the point I'm trying to make here is that there is a very clear physical way to get to the emotion if an actor wants to create a character. It is not something I need to kind of deepen, go inside my past or whatever. It doesn't have to be the past or experiences I have made. I can actually use that body by changing the posture. I can change the way I think. And if I can change the way I think, I have an influence, I would say, on how I can feel. And this is something I can use on the stage to my advantage. It will give me a freedom, and it will definitely give me the opportunity to not identify with the character, as this posture is something I have been moving myself into, so I can move myself back. No problem. Now, the credibility of the moment is people might say, yeah, this sounds like really technical. And I've heard that many times already. People think it's quite a technical thing. It is not. It is definitely not a technical thing. But I can understand that people have the impression. When we work on the biomechanics, there are a lot of technical aspects we have to take into consideration. Like we work a lot on the feet, we work a lot on the legs, the way we use the feet. This is quite technical. My teacher used to say that the feet are the eyes of the actor. So when we look at the legs are actually the motor of every single movement. If I want to use the whole body, I have to construct from the bottom to the top. I cannot just gesticulate with my hands or use facial expressions. And I'm really talking about theater, because if we are talking about cinema, about film, of course, we have situation where the whole body is not visible, you have a very close up, then it's a very difficult exercise. Nevertheless, it can still be supported by the whole body, but this is like something very complicated, I would say. There is, again, a saying from Meyerhold which struck me, like hit me completely. He said, physical form is the medium which reveals emotion. And that kind of summarizes the whole idea, I think. So physical form is the medium that gives me a way, that gives me access to the emotion. The danger with the form, as you've seen on the pictures, is that people out of prejudices might think, is that the form you're talking about? No, this is not the form I'm talking about. The form can be very daily. It can be very simple. It can be very natural. But we have to look at theater as an art form and not as a place where we want to reproduce reality. And I'm kind of quoting Meyerhold because that was his big struggle. Stanislavski was indeed reproducing a kind of reality or naturalism on the stage. Meyerhold wanted to take distance to that. He wanted to look at theater as a place where new forms have the possibility to be generated. Maybe I think it's time, because not much time left.
I watched some videos of Bogdanov, and I have a question if he ever mentioned anything connecting like breathing and sounding and moving.
When we look into what has been written down by students and by actors, and also by Eisenstein, who has documented a few stuff because he was actually a pupil or a student from Meyerhold at that time, we do not find anything back connecting the biomechanics with the breathing or the speaking apparatus. This question comes up again and again and again and again. And the only thing I can answer out of my work is that working on the point of command, what we do, I can try to just kind of, well, I'm going to try to show you that. I'm not sure. So the point of command is basically that point. So what I will try to show you that. So what we do, we actually work on the point of command, like putting it into that all direction. Then we start like making circles in the horizontal, the vertical, and in the back direction, and also in the diagonal. A lot of actors find it quite difficult to work on that because they have to isolate that point of command. You can also call it this point of control or central point. To find the motor of that point of command, we have to isolate it. So it means we're not using shoulders, we're not using the hips, we just kind of focus on that. And the question is, what makes the point of command move? Because the point of command is no muscle and it's not a joint. So basically it cannot move. So there must be something behind that makes it move. And the only thing that we can say that it makes it move is the diaphragm. So when we work on the point of command, we are actually indirectly working on the breathing and on the speaking. But there is nothing written about biomechanics, and I'm not saying he didn't do it. I cannot tell. This man was a genius, I would say, and Meyerhold was in that sense a bad person because he didn't write anything down. So he kind of left us like in an empty space, like with nothing inside. And we all have to think about what could it have been. So that's a problem. That's also a problem to have a look at the biomechanics in the contemporary sense, because we don't. If you look at Stanislavski, this man, amazing. He wrote everything down. We can still read his books. But you cannot read anything about the biomechanics. I challenge everybody of you to find a book about biomechanics. You will indeed find books about a whole book full of interesting things. But if you look at the biomechanics, it will be 2 pages. Now, how can I construct a method on 2 pages? It's impossible, right? By the way, people would definitely ask you, there are good books about it. The only good book, and I'm a bit ashamed to show you that book because it's my Bible, it's very old, so it's really a horrible condition, is that book, which is in German. But this book is actually only about the biomechanics. It tells a bit of historical context, but not that much. This is all about the biomechanics, everything. This has been written together with Gennady Bogdanov, by the way. But it is in German. So that's a problem. There is hardly anything to find about the biomechanics. If I look at the principle of the Atkas, I can tell you just as an actor, it's a very, very simple thing. A little anecdote. I was in a play in Belgium a long time ago. I was at the very beginning of my biomechanics understandings. And I had to say as a character, which didn't even have a name, it was called Nephew. That was the name of the character, Nephew. And Nephew was smoking cigarettes all the time. At that time, it was normal to smoke cigarettes on stage. And I remember that one of the sentences I had to say, okay, then I go. And every time I said this stupid sentence, okay, then I go, I was like, something wrong. I don't know. I don't feel it. So I couldn't really play it in a proper way, even though it's a very simple thing. But I'm not going to tell you the whole context. And having the cigarette, which was almost finished, I threw the cigarette away. And by doing this gesture, I said, okay, then I'm going. And then I realized, oh, wow, this was like so natural because of the movement. Now, this is the Atkas, the preparation, the idea. The idea is I throw the cigarette because I'm going. And then it was very simple to give that sentence. I made a lot of experiences as an actor, which helped me, of course, constructing my teaching and questioning some stuff from Meyerhold.
Okay. From what I understand of your speaking today, there's a particular order of how the actor works with biomechanics to relate the concrete of the movement to the thinking and feeling of the character.
That's the final goal.
Yeah, and yesterday we were presented with a different matrix, that the body, mind, and spirit, emotion is it's more interchangeable, the relationships. It's not always just concrete moving this way. And you had mentioned, yes, and isn't the trouble that occurs potentially for emotional interference or whatever, simply a matter of the actor identifying the person in reality, identifying too closely with the character. And I'd like to hear you speak a little bit more about the rest of your responses to these other ideas from the perspective you hold from biomechanics. Did that make sense? Did it make sense?
Your question makes sense. I'm not so sure if my answer will make sense. When I say you have to send the body forward, it's because I want to free the mind of the actor. By sending the movement before the thought comes, I free myself as an actor to be able to compose a space, to compose with my partner, to find a way to dig into the emotion of the character, without being too much in the brain, too much in the head, too much in thinking. You send the body forward, but you cannot just make the movement for the movement. You need indeed to create, by making the movement, you have to create the thought. So basically, the ideal situation is that the how you do it and what you do become one, which means there is indeed, I'm making the difference because this is something which does not happen all too much. We are much more familiar. There are so many techniques to work the other way around. There are so little approaches that actually send the body first, or send that the body is the main thing. Of course, I will not say if the body is right, forget about everything. You're a good actor. Of course not. That's not true. What it has to be, I think, is that in the end, it is an interchangeable movement between what the body does and what the mind does. I'm making the distinction just to be able to talk about the biomechanics. I'm not saying that's the way it should be. You know, I would maybe say it in another way, which is very simplistic. At the same time, it maybe tells the whole answer. If you look at Stanislavski, you could say, I'm working from the inside to the outside. It's a very stupid way to say that, but you could say that. And if you look at Meyerhold, you say, oh, that's the opposite. I'm working from the outside to the inside. Now, yes, you could say that. In the end, when you are acting, there is no difference to make, because there is an interaction between these two, which is inseparable. You cannot separate them. We are separating them because there is a need to do so, because there is a lack of education of the body. There is a lot of education about emotion, about so many things, which is connected with the inner work of the actor, which is definitely very valuable. I'm not saying this is bullshit. But I noticed that the body will always be a kind of a consequence of a thought. And this is what I think theater does not want. So basically, there is a continuous flow between these two. The question I would say I asked the people is, then, where do you start from? What will be your first move? Will you be moving from the inside to the outside? Take it as in simplistic terms, or from the outside to the inside. I believe, of course, because of doing the biomechanics, that you work from the inside, work from the outside to the inside to reconnect from the inside to the outside. And from there on, it starts like flowing, and there is no distinction to make. When I work with young actors, but also when I work with more experienced actors, and they are interested and willing to work on their body, and we talk about biomechanics and all the principles, and I say, when you go on the stage, please, can you forget about the biomechanics? Because this is something you have to do in the rehearsals. We don't want to sell biomechanics. We don't want to sell that form. We want to be acting. We want to be playing. We want to be free. And again, the form is so important. We are sometimes afraid to use the form because it might become formal. And I think this is something that's like, you know, especially in Germany, also they are like afraid, oh, that's formal, you know, but that's also, it's like an insult. If it's formal, it's an insult. But form is what we need. We are form. The body is form. I cannot deny form. It's impossible. And I see that Veronica is already looking at me with big eyes. So there's so much more I want to tell. But anyway, yeah.
Thank you for your comments.